He also ran clean energy for Biden during the campaign. So what he believes in his book, Creating Climate Wealth, which you can read, which is a fantastic, it's a Bible for me, actually. What he says, of course, he's an Indian. Of course, he's the founder of Sun Edison and Generate Capital. So Jigger Shah says, we already have the necessary technologies. What we need to do is innovate in terms of business models to bring those technologies to the bottom of the pyramid.
Okay, so you know what that sound means. It's time for tech news. Here we go. Happy Wednesday, December 28th. Alameda linked wallets traded Lido, Polygon, Uniswap, and other tokens for Ether and USDT before swapping for Bitcoin, taking their holdings to 47.6 Bitcoin. So wallets linked to Alameda Research, that's Sam's, other side hustle, have sold crypto tokens, and these swaps happened barely days after he posted bail. Next up, a look at North Dimension, a little-known Alameda Research subsidiary, where the SEC says FTX told customers to wire funds to trade without disclosing the ties. Among the 130 or so companies in Sam Bankman-Fried's sprawling crypto empire, North Dimension Inc. assumed low profile. The dude had a 130 company corporate shell? That's crazy. Court filing, Sam Bankman-Fried said in an affidavit that he and Gary Wang borrowed $546 million from Alameda to buy a nearly 8% stake in Robinhood. I did not know that. Next, Bloomberg says they have sources that the Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into alleged $370 million in assets stolen as FTX declares bankruptcy, separate from its fraud case against SBF. So there's a whole new criminal investigation underway for another $370 million. Reuters says in filings, the U.S. charges Avraham Eisenberg with commodities fraud and manipulation for trying to steal $110 million in October by rigging DeFi platform called Mango Markets, which I've never heard of. So we're going to move right along. Solana dropped 10% to around $10 as Bitcoin and Ether.
Actually, that story about Eisenberg is actually quite interesting.
Please do.
Because you remember how we talked about derivative finance versus decentralized finance.
Once or
Eisenberg.
twice.
Say again?
Once or twice.
Yeah, just once or twice. But Eisenberg exploited this by showing that, the frailty of relatively illiquid markets. So he could manipulate the price of an asset. And so it's materially similar to what was happening with SBF and Alameda with the collateral.
Hold on, is that a funny sound from Nicholas?
Yeah. Nicholas,
Nicholas, I think your
I'll switch out.
You can come back without your headset, I think. Just speak directly to the phone.
I think he's reconnecting.
Yeah.
Hey, is that better?
Much better.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So the material is similar because this is showing the sort of weakness of thinly traded markets and the way that you can manipulate the prices on these DeFi, in inverted commas, exchanges. And so Eisenberg will argue that he was well within his rights. I mean, I don't think he was, but he will argue this, that he, by understanding the liquidity in the market, he was able to exploit the protocol or whatever it was, the service that was offered Mango Markets. And this really it ensued in him stealing money from everybody else, but he really did it within the boundaries of what was possible using the tools available to him. And similarly, Sam Bankman-Fried and Alameda were doing the same thing at a much larger scale, but less, less fairly, shall we say, by manipulating the value of the FTT token. So these are materially similar things, and you're seeing the various different authorities show how deep their bite extends. In the case of SBF, the extradition from the Bahamas to the US, which was seamless. They just handed him over essentially into their jurisdiction. And I think Eisenberg was picked up in Puerto Rico, where he'd been hanging out with the crypto bros, I'm sure. And he has been shown, I think it's the CFTC in this case, because it was notionally falling under the idea of an exchange. So you're starting to see how through the activities of enforcement, how far the hand extends, and even if you are notionally decentralized, if you're performing services that look like an exchange, walk like an exchange, talk like an exchange, you're going to get regulated by the CFTC. And if you're issuing securities like FTT, you're going to get regulated by the SEC, and they're all going to cooperate. So this is, again, showing the frailty of fake decentralization.
So Nicholas, just one of the questions I've been following this since the beginning, and one of the questions that has risen a lot is about the extent to which SBF was the ringleader, or was he just a bit of a pawn and there were some overarching elements? So that's how much do you think it was him, is question number one. Number two, how much do you think the parents were involved with this? Because they work obviously in an area which is very much perfectly suited to dealing with the fallout from this. How much do you think that they've had more involvement with this than what meets the eye?
I think that SBF is one of those mimetic creations of the moment, right? He's got that Musk-like, what should we say, Asperger's genius perception, which is made up of an asymmetry of information, i.e., you don't question what he says, but anyone, as you've heard me talk, who listened to what he was saying, realized that the guy was not the real deal, and whether he was at Jane, was he the real deal, or was this, as we've seen, Wang is the programmer, SBF is the sort of front man and the sort of playing to the crowd, and he even recognized that, and they played, both sides in different ways. And so I think he's just a totem, and we saw how the forces of Silicon Valley that are the forces of, shall we say, the liberal elite in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley, got behind Solana. So there's a faction of Silicon Valley that is, shall we say, right-leaning, and that's the PayPal mafia led by Thiel, the Muscovites, etc. And then you've got the left-leaning, Stanford, Wokerati, and the VCs that align with that grouping. And so they, I definitely think that he was less of a genius and more of a, like a mimetic. A meme king, yes, like Theranos. She dressed a certain way and spoke in a certain way, and this attracted a certain group of people that were willing to believe in him because of the, shall we say, borrowed vista of his parents and of their clique. So that was why O'Leary, who is just a shilling pump and dump artist alongside Scamath and the rest of them, ultimately said, I trust Sam Bankman-Fried because X, Y, because his parents are this, that, and the other. So this is, all the sort of end of empire, let's call it technocracy, and, all of the sort of power centers who pick their runner and rider, and these are all centralized solutions. And so instead of trusting math, they trust credentials, and that's not what the new era is going to be about. And the new era is about verifying and then trusting. So, to your question, SBF, mastermind or master meme, I think it's just a meme lord. And if you say how far are the parents involved, I would assume that they were involved because of the credentialing and borrowed vista. But I think that people are often just fooled by randomness, and only time will tell who are the true
The
innovators.
quick follow up I have to that then is, and can I just say that was a golden answer in terms of woke rati master meme. I'm writing those down, mate. My quick follow up for that
We
is
have the
then
memes of production.
um, my quick follow up is just what about then this idea that he sort of I think it was you, Tyler, but maybe someone talked about this idea of manslaughter instead of murder. So what he takes the front of the brunt of the of damage for his parents to keep the majority of the funds and get off scot free, or I'm
No,
just curious.
no, this is all gonna get unwound, and it's all gonna be exposed ultimately, because it is all exposable. The question is how far, does this serve, the it's really, these are all just, I think it was just Sonali saying before, we're in a different age. We're moving into, at the end of zero interest rate policies, these types of systems and bubbles form at the end of cycles. And we are at the end of a cycle, and we're entering into a new cycle. And that new cycle is going to be accompanied by a deeper comprehension of the information field more generally, and the fact that we are going to want to verify and then trust, and that we are post-truth and post-trust, as we know from the information that we received from Twitter that Elon is supposedly exposing. But these were all things that tech news around the world, attendees and contributors, have been talking about for years, that there is no such thing as information that is not mediated by the centralized powers, whether they are in China, Russia, the Middle East, or the USA. They are all mediated because they are businesses that are subject to the laws of the country, etc. And so this is just sort of we're just moving into the next phase. So I just think it's sad that we have to go through these learnings, but this is the only way people learn, is through experience. So this is just the end of empire, of this tulip phase, and I'm going to enter a new phase.
Hey, Nicholas, I had a follow-up question to Piotr's, and I know exactly where I was sitting in the car in a parking lot when you told me well over a year ago that people were thinking that you were crazy, not literal, but some of your ideas. But over time, to your point, the last year or two, I think it's become much more clear in reality. I guess my question, which is a follow-up to Piotr, we've got the Elizabeth Holmes, we've got the VCs, and I love the way you sort of categorize that to both focus on the middle, the right, and the left in terms of motivations. But there will be innovation as we move forward. Things will get reset. There's going to be a lot of things, including crypto, that are going to be unwound. But beneath, and this isn't an Elon plug, but beneath Elon, who you've been calling the meme king for a long time, there will be innovation. There will be generative use cases. There'll be use cases for AI that won't be just meme based. As a matter of fact, I don't want to jump on the GPT bandwagon. How do we separate, once we establish truth, veracity, source identity, what's the vetting process that they don't have to be characterized as meme kings, that we can see generative uses to innovation? What will be the fact checking? I don't want to say the fact checking source, but how do we think differently as we hear tech news around the world and vet like we do through these announcements to figure out what's real and what's not, so we can see these things earlier in the cycle and not look back like the Atlantic and say the lost decade, right? We've lost an entire decade to social media. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that, look, it has been frustrating, of course, as you noted from our conversation previously, that people do think you're crazy when you talk about all these things, and then we go through COVID and we go through the loss of trust that we've suffered in everything, and all of the, these are known as, in olden days, as revelations, right? Things are being revealed because the information cannot be kept secret. There is hardly any information that you can guarantee its privacy. Look at what's going on at the moment with this, trying to sell 400 million profiles or whatever it is on Facebook, and Twitter and all this other stuff. So we are definitely post-truth and post-trust. And when you move into those realms, you realize that you need two critical things for society to move forward. And the first of them is privacy, because without privacy, you have no way to establish the second thing which humans need, which is truth. And the problem with truth is that it is made up by consensus, essentially. And in order to come to consensus, you need to be able to have privacy in how you express your opinions, because you will be judged. So when everyone was saying, why are all the polls wrong, with Trump and Clinton and, that whole sort of issue with the polling is wrong. Well, the polling is wrong because if you ask in a polarized subject, people will give you the answer they think that you want to hear, and so you will get skewed information. So we are in a world that we are now coming to a realization that it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you're consuming Twitter to get all of your information, or if it was Facebook during 2016, you will have a problem that humans will come to ask themselves, who do I trust? And that's the first, real question. And we've said this before, there are three routes of travel. There's, do I trust the state? Do I trust the corporate? Or do I trust myself? And the answer will be in each, according to the way that information, the way that you interact with the state and with corporations and, with other individuals. So we need to, I think, move towards a world where digital rights are recognized as human rights, and that we get to own all the information that is in the field that surrounds us, which is pretty much everything that we interact with. And that's really the era that we're coming into. And then the question is, if we're in a world of information, then all that information is valuable, and the question is, what share do we all get of that valuable information? And the information about the individual and the information about the collective has greater value in the collective, as we know, because of, as you were saying, ChatGPT and AI. So the individual data is not really very valuable, but the collective data is immensely valuable, and the information that is being cohered, the question of who owns that information is going to become extremely important. And the question is it going to be the state, is it going to be the corporate, or is it going to be the self? And so what we come to is that the truth is priceless. Knowing what is true is extremely valuable to humans. And so we all need to be able to say that I own my digital life, I own my digital identity, I own my digital information, and I am valuable. And that realization is coming in, the very short order. So the only question is, can we claim it? That's where we're at.
Nicholas, can you do me a favor? Can you write a testimonial story of how in the next few years, at the right time, as this new world emerges, what is the new truth? This is something that it's just it's one thing to describe, and I think I'm rooting for what what you're saying. It's one thing to describe it architecturally versus how does the truth reemerge, right? Because that's kind of the issue. The issue is our credible institutions are being attacked. Quite frankly, y'all, everyone's known that crypto has, I call it fraud tech now, not even fintech, because it's very specifically based on people's character. You're getting what we're getting, right? So the story, the testimonial SBX is now, it's becoming an archetype, a whole story for a whole segment of this decentralized crypto anon.
They're centralized, David. You must make a difference. When you have, a company like, that's not decentralization. That's not the technology. That's the fraudsters. That's what I always used to say to you guys.
I understand.
Like, if there's an owner, if there's a VC announcing that they invested in VC X $billion into that, then it's not the winner. the winner has to be of by a
But how
fraud.
does the framing of centralized versus decent, how is that used with Stanford? Just a general Wokarati Stanford framing.
Stanford's
Stanford,
got nothing, to do with it.
I know that's okay. So,
But
but
if
but
you're
but
if
it
you're someone who's at Stanford that is interested in cryptography and interested in decentralized systems, then you can contribute, but you don't
I,
get to create a
there's,
company.
you know what? There's actually something important being discussed because if the word is being used to mean two different things, and that's where the confusion's coming in. David's meaning the people that David's describing, like the Sam Bankman-Fried and Brian over at Coinbase or whatever, they might refer to what they're doing as decentralized, meaning not part of the centralized banking system, although it is becoming part of the centralized banking system. But in effect, it operates outside of the purview of the banking, the U.S.
It
Federal.
doesn't. It doesn't though.
No,
It doesn't.
I know
That's
it
the
doesn't.
big. That's the big nonsense. It's
That's
like
what.
because
Well, that's what we're.
the
That's
difference
what.
between decentralized and centralized
can I
most
get to
I
my
know.
can I
accurately.
get
I
back to
know.
my
Hold on.
point
Wait.
though?
No. 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 I
Go
got to
ahead.
make this
Go ahead.
point.
Yeah.
My point is that technologists and not Chris, who my code is really rattling my brain here today. Nicholas is saying that real decentralization means technologically decentralized, meaning there's no central power at all, any, let alone banking systems. So we need to have a word. We have a word for the technologically decentralized. It's decentralized. And the problem is that word sort of got hijacked by the SPFs and the like, who are building very centralized power. The power is very centralized, but it's not part of the government centralized system. So we need nomenclature needs to develop to make a necessary distinction of what type of decentralized we're talking about. And so because the
I
term sort of got hijacked. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the term is an architectural framing. I'm not talking. I'm talking like computer architecture. I'm talking about like just how do you build a system. It's a systemic framing, where part of its use is in in framing power. And I guess for me, I'd prefer to use the words power and just how does it affect the credibility of how we cultivate real fact based truth, not fake facts, and and for one component, and then how it's used because the architecture of crypto is decentralization, which has an anonymous piece to it, which is used to create fraud tech. So
Okay, so we got to unpick that,
it's
David.
so I understand, but that's a function of character. If you're developing a system, an architecture that allows anonymity, then we are all subject to their character. So I agree with
Okay,
your
so
saying with regards to how centralized power it has been corrupted. Everybody agrees with that, right? But it's the process and how the system can be corrupted is the problem. If we're going to recast an architecture that can also be corrupted, you have the same problem just with a different architecture, right? So
wrong.
I totally
So
the
so let's go through
testimonial.
it, David. Let's
Yeah,
go
yeah,
through
yeah.
it.
So just last 10 seconds. The testimonial that we all need to hear, I think, is in the new decentralized world when state problem and state the process that emerges that rebuilds a real credible truth. Because quite frankly, I of course I'm going to defend Stanford. Okay, we've got through what two or three professors. Go back to the Trump days. We got another couple people that were rebuked by the staff over there. I mean, the Stanford's contribution is just is so massive, right? So there are some bad apples in every Harvard. I mean anywhere in and my undergrad was at Arizona State, and you have this systemic everywhere where people of bad character can, especially nowadays, can grab a headline. So please go ahead,
Okay,
Nicholas.
so let's break it down first of all. So if we talk about decentralized, David, you all right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I'm still waking up, bro. No coffee. This was all on no coffee. I know it sounds like it's no coffee, but yeah.
So we're going to break it down. To say, what is decentralized? So decentralized is, if we wanted to make the big difference, is that a truly decentralized protocol is free open source software, okay? And it is completely censorship resistant. That means that it cannot be stopped. It is unstoppable, and it is immutable, and it is essentially people powered. It is distributed, and it is decentralized through the software itself. So it needs to be free open source software so that it's free speech. If it's closed source and it's created by an investment of money from investors anywhere in the world, it is likely to be characterized as a security, and that would mean that it wasn't censorship resistant because it would be subject to the laws of a regulator in the US, the SEC, by way of example. So that's why when I started by saying that Avraham Eisenberg is similar to SBF, because it's highlighting that these are not censorship resistant systems, okay? These are companies that are trying to be involved in this new decentralized world, but they are in it for profit, not to create public technology infrastructure. So decentralized systems are free open source software that are people powered, that when I say people powered, they're people powered at the level of the developers that develop the protocol. They are people powered by people who join the network, operating nodes that distribute the software, and that software is not bounded by any nation state or by anything other than the ability of the user to run the software. That's what decentralized world means. And there can be a lead developer. In the case of Bitcoin, it was Satoshi Nakamoto. In the case of Varus, where I'm work towards the public good, it is led by Mike Tatongi. And so you can have identified individuals. It doesn't rely on anonymity. Now, within where we are in the development of the decentralized world, we have got some very good primitives like the UTXO blockchain that enable us to see that these are the new building blocks of the new internet. And the new internet, I would proffer, should be called the true net, which is what we want. We want to have an internet of truth. And that internet of truth would enable us to better collaborate and better cooperate if we could verify all of the information that surrounds us, because our human behavior is that we have an a priori estimate, an advance estimate of things that we think are going to happen, and then we have a ex post or posterior score of what did happen, and that's how we, as humans, learn. That's the basis of Bayes' theorem, is we have a wide probability of things that could happen that narrows into an event that does happen, and that event is measured in our consciousness. That's how we work as humans, and we work at scale by saying, if I had to work out everything, it would be problematic, so we build ourselves into families and tribes and religions and groups that cooperate and collaborate in order to make the lifting of the progress of humanity more and more simple. As we move into a more technological age, Moore's law enables us to get the power of computing, and Metcalfe's law gives us the power of communications, such that we have superpowers in terms of our ability to understand things, as we've seen with AIs, and superpowers in terms of computing, that we can keep information between us using a small, what would be a small unit of computing, like our mobile phone. So we have the tools, the primitive tools, that enable us to run our own systems. What we don't have, and I think this is what Sonali was alluding to, are business models in the old way of doing things that had enabled us to unleash this amazing potential. Right? So we're all carrying a supercomputer in our pocket, more powerful than the hardware that got us to the moon, right? And we've got computers that we hardly use any of their processing power, really. Most people are just playing games or using Excel or whatever. So we have this amazing amount of technology, And we didn't have a business model that was a distributed and decentralized business model until 2009. And we haven't had the primitives to go alongside that until pretty much now. And those primitives are the primitives of identity and the primitives of zero-knowledge privacy, zero-knowledge technologies that only really came about in 2015, 16 time. So when you ask about how do we establish these new truths and a true net that effectively evolves the internet, we need the combination of ways to share value amongst large groups of people, ways to spread the compute of that information amongst people, and ways to reward members of that new network economy, and ways to then provide for those participants in that network economy to share their information privately but provably, so that we can have an information field that becomes more and more accurate. But with the ability to keep privacy, we can create what's known as general consensus in a much more effective way, because we can see what people, there's a difference between what people say and what they do. We know that in our general lives, right? Oh, I'll call you tomorrow, or I'll give you this, or I'll do that. People know that there's a fuzz factor. When you move into that new era where you have verifiable data that you own and control, and that you contribute to the general pool of information in a way that is private, you get an emergent true net, and you get that true net based on a web of exchanges of information that is verifiably true. That is what is coming. The question is, are you going to participate in a state-based version of that, like the social credit system in China, or a corporate version of that, like Elon's Everything app, or a decentralized, distributed, self-sovereign, truly protected by the Constitution version, because it's free speech, because it's free open source software, and because you're self-custodying your assets and your valuable information, you have protected yourself under, if you're American, the Fourth Amendment for privacy, because you're not providing that information to an intermediary. You are keeping that information under your control, and therefore you negate the surveillance state and you negate the surveillance capitalists. So that's the way it happens.
So
They might
let me
not want to be negated.
well, can I ask just one little question just to kind of help me materialize this one last little hop? Is the credibility going to be built on the source, the person, and how would credibility be built,
Great
or on
question.
the topic itself? Like, are we voting on like, hey, George said A, so but George has this level of credibility versus A has cultivated
Sure.
this
Understand.
much trust? Like, it's got a whatever vote.
Yeah.
How
So the beauty of zero-knowledge technologies and privacy enables you to build an attestation framework. So if you think about your own consciousness and your own memories and your own experiences, you score every single thing. So as Hofstadter said, we see, we label, and we judge. We do that as a human process. And we mark out in our own minds. In the digital consciousness, you have a web of exchanges, just like you do currently, where you go on various different websites, you're exchanging information that says you spent X amount of time, looking at Instagram, and X amount of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you have a relationship between your device and those endpoints that establishes what you do in your digital life and in your physical life where it has a digital endpoint. So that same web of exchanges will exist. The difference being that those web of exchanges will be privacy enabled, and that you will be able to control who you share that information with and who you obscure that information from. And essentially everything else remains the same. So it is the same as a social credit system in China, except that it's owned of, by, and for the people, and it is not able to be centrally manipulated. So essentially what you're doing is changing the owner. The flippening that people talk about is really the flippening of who owns the network economy and who owns the network of valuable information, and who those rightful owners are and how are they permissioned. All of those elements exist today, and all of those elements can be replicated with a zero-knowledge proof of attestable information from the endpoint. So, for example, you're going to get your driving license attestation from the Department of Transport if you're in America, right? You're going, or the MOT if you're in the UK, for example. So you will still interact with endpoints that are government or endpoints that are corporates, because there are government things that you want, your passport, your driving license, etc., marriage certificate, whatever it might be. And you're just really just saying those endpoints will exist, but now I get a signature on my side, and I get the ability to keep that information private because I can store it myself and manage my valuable information. In the way that I refer to it is, you have to think you have to be value able. You have to be able to store signatures and attestations of value in a wallet that you own and control, and you can contribute that information to public pools of data privately, so that you're not disclosing any of your private information, but you're providing proofs that you did go to work, you did donate X to charity, you did whatever proofs you want to participate with, or whatever proofs you are asked for from the duly authorized authority, be it the government or be it a corporation that you work for example.
Moving on. Kraken, which is one of the exchanges, says it plans to close its cryptocurrency exchange services in Japan on January 31st, weeks after cutting its workforce by 30%. The information says it has sources that Amazon is working on a standalone app for watching sports, decluttering the Prime Video app. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy recently reaffirmed Amazon's video ambitions, because they got to go head-to-head with Netflix. And Mastodon CEO says he rejected more than 5 U.S. investors offering hundreds of thousands of dollars to preserve the platform's non-profit status. And Bloomberg says investors sue Gemini and Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss. That's the Winklevoss twins from the early days of the Facebook. And now the investors are suing their new crypto thing called Gemini over offering Gemini Trust earn interest-bearing accounts, which Gemini failed to register as securities. Gemini and its founders, the Winklevoss twins, were sued by investors who claim the crypto asset exchange sold interest-bearing accounts, but weren't registered as securities. And then Reuters says that China's online game regulator approves 45 foreign video games, including Nintendo's Pokemon Unite, effectively marking the end of Beijing's crackdown on foreign games. TSMC.
They hate Pikachu. It's sad.
TSMC's planned Arizona plant is catalyzing real estate development in northern Phoenix, bringing in hundreds of skilled workers from Taiwan and more. Wall Street Journal, after China lifted its COVID-19 rules, leading to surging cases, social media censors relaxed some rules, allowing criticism of protesters but not the government. And Reuters says, as do many others, that the U.S. House on Capitol Hill bans TikTok on all House-managed devices, citing a quote-unquote high risk due to a number of security issues following similar bans for U.S. government devices.
Do you think this might be something because they want to do something more comprehensive, but they're unable to move forward on that, or they don't think they think they're going to get too much pushback, so they're doing more of a symbolic ban? Because the number of devices they can actually do this with is very limited under these sorts of things. But if they want to do more comprehensive, it would be a much more involved process. I'm wondering if maybe this is more just signaling essentially intention rather than actually carrying out essentially a more comprehensive one.
It's an admission or conceding the fact that they believe that very wholeheartedly that it's a high security risk, then why are they okay with that happening on American citizens when they're not willing to have it happen on themselves? Why is it tolerable? Maybe it's not.
That makes sense.
Maybe, why is it a state issue or something like that?
So
Um,
Tyler,
yes.
I think part of the problem comes down to is because of a lot of things that TikTok does. So it picks up typing patterns. It literally could pick up everything you're typing, as well as all the voice stuff and everything else. From a security perspective, okay, a bunch of us have been talking about this lately. One thing that they're leaving out is they're only banning it on government phones. But what happens if you have your personal cell phone next to you while you're at home working in the office? It will still pick up on
If I
everything.
may,
Oh, yes.
as somebody who's
Sonali.
actually in DC and who's
Yes,
been
Sonali.
lobbying
Yes.
to make TikTok, OnlyFans, and Seeking Arrangement illegal
Yeah.
for
Hold on,
two
Sonali.
years,
Let me roll out the royal red carpet here. What is, if you could, please tell us the Biden administration's perspective on TikTok?
So I'm a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur and in private practice, and I represent Biden. So I can do whatever the fuck I want, which is kind of amazing. Last night I was actually close to the White House. I was on 14th and K Street. I was at a dance party, dancing bachata and protesting and having my little Black Panther moment, of course, as I always do. It is Kwanzaa, by the way. Happy Kwanzaa, happy Hanukkah, happy Christmas, happy Hindu Day. I don't know what we're calling it. Yeah, happy birthday, happy Janam Din. We are newly baptized, folks. Because guess what? All those folks that are content creators, supposedly that are entrepreneurs that were selling, dick pics and feet pics. Guess what? Your time is up. You don't have any property foreclosure. Thank you very much, Knowledge today here in Washington D.C.
Great, thank you. And for those who are wondering, Sonali, are you in fact GPT-4?
I'm a Hindu American princess. Here in Bethesda, Maryland, but I do represent the White House as well. And I was born and raised, I'm 39 years old. I was born and raised in this area, Washington, D.C., although I live in Brooklyn full time. So I'm at my parents' place for the holidays. I decided to not drink, not smoke, not do anything, and just do my tapasya, if you will, which is a penance. I just puja, pray and write and write and write. So everybody else can have a good holiday because I was just so sick and tired of this, of these horrors ruining everybody's lives.
Great answer. So the next article is, as the NASDAQ closes its worst year since 2008, IBM was a bright spot for tech companies with a $50 billion market cap, rising 6% in 2022. India's government-backed nonprofit Open Network for Digital Commerce is holding trials in over 85 cities, including Bangalore or Bengaluru. Some telehealth, separate article, Wall Street Journal, some telehealth companies are running social media ads promoting drugs for unapproved
Hold
uses.
on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on,
Yes,
hold
sir.
on. You just skipped over that. So the Indians are running a version of WeChat, basically? Is that what you just said?
India's government-backed nonprofit called Open Network for Digital Commerce is holding trials in over 85 cities.
Okay, so it sounds pretty similar to what the Chinese are doing, it sounds like. In 85 cities, pretty impressive. So they're going to run a surveillance state, it sounds like.
Some telehealth, well, India was one of the first that made it quite clear that they really wanted to have their ability to moderate Twitter. And I think it'll be interesting if the Twitter files ever get to the point of discussing what other countries' governments are doing with Twitter, because lately it's been focused on what the FBI did with Twitter. But we watched in real time on a day-by-day basis, and had really interesting sources that made it abundantly clear that India insisted on having the ability to control in real time what was happening in Twitter in India. Very
Not
Can
only
I?
unnecessary.
that,
Can I?
they implemented a full identity system during COVID in order to roll out benefits to a large portion of the population that is now operating under a national ID scheme. And I am assuming that the ID scheme will be tied into this 85 state rollout of this Chamber of Commerce thing, which sounds like digital CBDCs, etc.
Right, and don't forget India very swiftly removed all of the Chinese apps all simultaneously. It came out to over about 220 apps in total, and because they couldn't control them, and then any kind of Western-based apps, had to comply with, you know, demands from Delhi about having moderators on the ground that could be held accountable. And then we saw later reports that Indian intelligence agents were working inside the Twitter offices by reputable sources.
I mean, there's no reason why they wouldn't. I mean, these are private companies regulated by government, and this is why I think this whole, sham of Elon's is like, oh, he's revealing something. It's like everybody knew this. This is what the government is, you know, notionally, as the regulator of these companies, going to do, and they're doing it. Well, they're trying to walk this fine line. They're not doing it very well, but certainly, if you look at India and China, they just outright say, do this, do that, and they just say it very publicly. You're not going to be able to do this unless you do that.
But they do make really good government workers when they're working in the private companies. They do show up. Just joking.
Well, so okay, now we're talking about forms of capitalism, right? Nicholas, you got me really thinking when in your response to the Indians they're doing that massive kind of test of a non-profit powered digital bank, not banking, but digital commerce system, right? So our form of capitalism, the problem with it is that it's optimized on one thing, and that's, short-term profits and only money, not people, not nature, not anything else, right? And so our corporate, the lobby, all of the corruption that we are living, the stew of shit that we live in, is because of our current form of American capitalism. The Chinese, it's not capitalism, right? It's a totally different model. India's trying to figure something out, and I agree with you. I mean, there's different forces on different sides of the fence, right? But the framing has to be that we recognize social equity, natural equity, or capital rather, social capital, natural capital, and then in the rise of the machine at this next level, we need to reconcile all of that. So, the role that privacy and data sovereignty and these things get manifest is in the social context. So
Exactly.
this really it's got me thinking more about the role of privacy and the risk of malactors that are anonymous and things like this, and that is something that we need
You,
to be really
you
thoughtful.
don't need to be afraid of. You're afraid of this anonymity thing. Anonymity, you can have privacy without needing the anonymity. Anonymity has been because it's been hard to be a whistleblower or do various different things. And yes, there are bad actors that act behind the scenes, but in reality, you were almost there with saying, look, if you've got this hybrid system where you've got the Indians are doing a not-for-profit, but it's not-for-profit, but it is a full surveillance economy, which is to say that if you don't have privacy, you don't have free and fair elections, and you don't have the ability for people to express what they really think because they're terrified of being surveilled and deplatformed, etc. And so this is the fine line, which is why digital rights are human rights, and why the need for privacy is not for anonymity, it's for the ability to interact using the latest versions of cryptography that enables you to keep your privacy but participate provably because there is an identity system that you can prove that you are a human and that you have done whatever it is that you are needed to do to comply with your ability to vote. So all of
But
these, this is the fine line that you need to get over. It's nothing to do with anonymity. It's to do with
no, hang on a
privacy
second.
that creates truth because people can be honest.
So, okay, so there are two, let's say that there are two basic environments within this different solution can sit, and these different solutions. What's crucial is how the out of digital in the IRL institutions, how effective they are. If you are in an authoritarian state, you got problems, and you need to use your digital life to garner the types of freedoms you're talking about. If you are in a struggling American, moment, right? where the credibility in institutions is just kind of plummeting, but there's still, with any kinds of real analysis, they still largely work, right? In that system, how can you not have at least an aspect? We can't call it all surveillance, right? It's kind of like the problem of why surveillance, one of the biggest problems, is because of the digital advertising business model, where we've conditioned everybody to get free shit because we're surveilling you, right? And then all of the third party data systems that have been created because of that. So in different countries you have different other risks, like as you're talking about with voting or even polling during an election. I mean, those are legitimate, and that's why some of the credibility of those have been fracturing. But you just triggered another realization, and I'm sorry, I'm only on half a cup of coffee. But the hybrid reality of we have to maintain and actually, quite frankly, cultivate credible, with institutions, public institutions that we have faith in, because we're not all going to go into
Right.
this Ready Player One kind of the real world fucking
Right, but the
sucks.
faith, you're going to have in them has to come from having access to that information and checking the veracity of that information, because people doubt the veracity of the information coming from the WHO or coming from the CDC or coming from the government. There are large swathes of the population that do not trust the institutions, and they question the veracity of our elections. And when we live in a digital world that has easily the ability to enable full identification of the individual and to enable privacy whilst proving information, which is where we live now. That's the new technologies. We have to update our systems. That's what we're going through. And the big question in updating those systems is, do we update them so that we can have a panopticon and the big brother and an all-seeing eye, the eye of Sauron, or do we use the systems that we have now developed and proven work that are private, provable, and people-powered? Those are the questions that are going to come before us.
Nicholas, um, I have actually a question. The Cardano team, you probably know this, it has been in Ethiopia since I think 2020. And they have been working with the government actually, with even MOUs and openly saying that they're working together. And they started with the education system, for example, giving students a unique identity, digital identity on the blockchain, and now moving into giving identity cards to the Ethiopian population in general. And we're all looking at it from the digital inclusion and at least the financial inclusion perspective, that a lot of the people do not have access to finance because just nobody knows who they are. But at the same time, where you two and everybody was discussing for the last hour, I'm just trying to see, isn't that really not decentralized? They may use
Correct.
distributed system,
You're
but they
very
are
right.
using they're not using the ADA
It's
and
a
the
fraud. It's a
cryptocurrency.
fraud. It's a fraud. It's very sad. It's very sad. They persuaded the Ethiopian government to use and to create an identity system for effectively, basically implementing a non-self-sovereign, non-truly decentralized system, and they score the students, and it enables them to select best performing students, and they dress it up as if it's going to be good, but really it's total surveillance. And they've put the government into a position of, really using ADA as a form of social credit system, starting with the education. So really just farming the children. And it's very sad. In my opinion, it is not
So
a
if
good
you do
solution.
have something like that, which has, sort of acceptance because, the government is the authority in the country, and then they're working together. So now, the Cardano team, which is part of this blockchain technology, as well as the cryptocurrency, the ADA, and other things, then now me as a person individually and others, how do we view this in general perspective? If I'm hearing you saying that, oh, okay, they shouldn't have done this. So how do we create that credibility that you were talking about earlier? If
Yeah.
these things happen, even by a team that's supposed to be working on decentralization and adoption and education and that type of stuff. So how do we really filter out all these problems that's happening everywhere?
So it's a very good question. It's unfortunately there's a proliferation of projects that are not decentralized. In my opinion, that are not acting in people's best interests, but they have managed to capture the minds of certain government actors. And unfortunately, I don't know how to stop those people from proliferating, because those people exist in all walks of life. I think the answer is that then that a better way should be self-evidently true and and be drive adoption. So I think that's the only thing that you can hope for, is that the right solution becomes so obviously better. But the question is, will governments and will corporations quash those hopes? That I don't know.
So
Apple's a big threat to decentralization, as is Google, as is Elon. These are all competing for people's valuable information so that they can harness your value.
so are you saying the Cardano team in general is not working good faith, or are they making misunderstandings? So the entire Cardano that has been at least developing a reputation, and we were listening to, now we get confused. Who do we to trust? So are you saying
Well,
Cardano team
Well,
is
I think if you
perhaps
know,
making? Mhm.
you might read the book about the founders of Ethereum, and you might read about Mr. Hoskinson and his early days would give you some insights into the nature of the leadership of this. Also, you might listen to some of the other Ethereans and their views of them. But at the same time, that doesn't disqualify the fact that they're trying to make a technology. But the problem is that they do not have a fair launch, credibly neutral, free open source project, and they are awarded themselves a giant amount of the project. So, I don't think that they are the solution, and I think that I think they're just going to be, unfortunately, many of these types of players. I really can't say. I don't want to slag them off either. I mean, I think some people think that they're good. Most people think that they've not necessarily got the right solution.
Okay. Now we go to the tweets. Did anyone have a tweet since we met last time, 24 hours ago, that they want to make sure we cover?
Did
Ken,
you cover Elon's epic thread response to Medvedev?
Elon who? Go ahead.
Elmo. Did you not see? Did you not see that, where the former prime minister tweeted all these things? Yeah, you commented on it, actually, I think,
I
in the
did.
back channel.
Yeah, Medvedev.
Tyler,
Did you
do you
discuss
have
it?
COVID? Did I
No,
hear you say? Oh, I thought you said you had COVID.
no. I was making a joke that I was having some kind of brain fog, and
Oh,
I
brain fog. Oh, okay.
jokingly attributed it to COVID. So, um, Medvedev, for those who don't know, did a humdinger of a tweet 24 hours ago.
Is there any day that this doesn't happen?
I mean, this was a really remarkable tweet, and Elon Musk even responded by saying "LOL." before
No, he
retweeting.
said he commented epic thread.
Right, he retweeted it saying epic thread, but originally he just replied saying LOL. Then he
Ah, I
did a
didn't see
quote
that.
retweet saying epic thread, and which indeed it is. It's a nominee for tweet of the year for sure, right, coming in at the right at the wire.
It's definitely got a lot of that Russian sauce. I know Jon Stewart makes this joke that maybe the whole Cold War is just a misunderstanding because Russians have an awkward way of speaking, but this was just next level. Really took the prize home for the year, the tweet of the year. Although I want to reiterate that he did talk about an alien suitcase with extraterrestrial visitors as if it was some episode of the Men in Black series. So something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, he was obviously joking. However, like some of the things that he brought up just, paralleled the Russian disinfo and
You
the
think he
way
was
that they've.
joking, LA?
I think that it's 80% joke. Maybe he thinks that it is 90% joke, but put it this way: when Putin's been throwing around Nazis, right, allegations of Nazis, right, and he just kind of repeats that, what do you do with that?
Did you see the tweet thread? He was quite specific on his predictions for 2023.
I
To,
thought
Ken,
the most interesting
to,
one was
Ellie's,
the one about the UK, right?
to
That one
Ellie's
was
credit, Russian humor is uh, sophisticated.
That's interesting. I never thought he was joking.
I didn't. I'm intrigued by that possible interpretation as well.
If you ever want to get at least an inkling of how sophisticated Russian humor can be, look up an article called "Putin's Rasputin" in the London Review of Books about Surkov, who was an advisor to Putin, and you will notice that many people are far more literate and insightful than might appear at first blush.
Okay, so let's
Comrade.
So is Alexander Dugin the Woody Allen of Russia?
Oh, he's in his own category.
there's definitely some Andy Kaufman esque stuff coming out of the Kremlin lately, though.
Well, it's clearly he's trying to prep for a post-Putin career. Clearly,
Oh,
Or
that's a
maybe
good point.
we need
that's
to.
clearly what's going on. Putin, y'all. This is clearly the beginning of the last chapter of Putin. We'll see how it finally gets written, but there's, whether it's short term or several years or something, there's a whole under the Putin kind of regime, number of people that kind of have to figure out what they're going to do next. So comedy, there's a long tail market for this, I suspect.
There was a meme of Putin laughing in that thread, and it was something to the effect of, "That was funny. I'll kill you last."
So let's take a
Hey,
vote.
Tyler, I
Yeah.
just wanted to say a number of the young people here, people under 30 for sure, won't get the Andy Kaufman reference. So, for those who
Okay.
don't know who he is, he's now deceased.
Oh,
But he was a well known comedian like in the 1980s, and you could Google him. He was one of the stars of a very well known sitcom at the time called Taxi. And I just want to give a couple of references so if people wanted to go Google that, because I think the younger people won't get that
and
reference.
just a point of clarification: to the best of our knowledge, he is deceased because there are sightings.
Oh, I don't really believe that, but okay.
Okay. So
I
let's do
never
this
thought we would be talking about Medvedev and Andy Kaufman
in the same sentence.
and Taxi and He's Not Dead. It's like we always made our way back to Kevin
I think it's
Bacon.
the Sonali influence,
Oh,
perhaps.
yeah, we'll go back to Cake and then the Twilight Zone music and everything. It'll be great.
Okay.
2023. ET disrupting everything plus this tweet. It's going to be great.
Here's what I'd like to do here. Let's read through Medvedev's predictions, his tweet thread of his top 10 predictions for 2023, and then we'll take a poll of raise your hands, and we'll see if we think this is a joke or not. Here we go. Medvedev. And for context, he's the president of the Russian Federation and was previously the prime minister, filling in for his good buddy Putin in between elections. Like, he can't be prime minister every year because then he's clearly authoritarian. So he shifts seats with his buddy Dmitry. So here we go. So here's Dmitry's predictions. On New Year's Eve, everybody's into making predictions. Many come up with futuristic hypotheses as if competing to single out the wildest and even the most absurd ones. Here's our humble prediction. Note the word our. What can happen in 2023? And you might be correct in assuming that if he says these are our predictions and he's inside of Russia and he's in the government, you can't really do that with somebody like Putin in charge without his full expressed consent now, could you? No, not really. Not with billionaires being tossed out of windows every weekend. So,
I think
number
it's
one,
called defenestration is the official term.
oil prices will rise to $150 a barrel, and gas will top $5,000 per 1,000 cubic meters. Now, I struggle to find the humor in that because that actually very likely will happen. That has
But
a
it's happened. But
I would
it's
say
happened
false.
before. We even had like high 140s during the Obama
yes,
administration.
but this is precisely something we would expect him to say. So
Right.
Correct.
it's
So
hard.
this is but this is like that would be good for Russia, but it implies that there's no peace, and it implies that there is some other
Right,
shock to the system, and it
right, and
also implies that there's not a recession, which is pulling the price of oil down
right,
at the
but it
moment.
also implies that you are going to pay for this one way or another, which is a
Well,
narrative.
luckily, Russia is having a Quentin Tarantino Clockwork Orange moment.
How so?
I am the Countess Savikov, right? My husband's Russian, living in Moscow. There's a lot of mayhem. A lot of people are unhappy.
Okay, number two, the UK will rejoin the EU. Now that could be
Not
human.
going to happen. The
No, but
UK should
Wait,
join
since
the
when?
EU,
but
but
we're analyzing
there's no
this for its
process.
potential to be a joke.
That's a very expensive joke right there.
Yeah, it took like 3 years to Brexit or something like that. They can't
I thought
just.
There's no pathway. There's no pathway to hold a referendum, and there is no way that the current administration is going to propose. They will lose their mandate completely, given that Rishi is
Okay,
a pro.
but
So it
let's
makes
not.
no sense.
We're not trying to analyze it for its
No,
logical
but we should. But we
ability.
should because he's making predictions. He's our
I
predictions. So
know,
that's
but
nonsense.
the
Nonsense
task
number
at
two.
hand is to analyze it for its potential comedic,
So, but it's
grounding.
only okay. So it's humorous, but yeah, okay. So is it funny? Yeah, Britain
No,
should.
is it? Not, I mean, it doesn't need to be funny by Western standards. Is he intending this to be a joke or is he actually serious? That's the measure by
Well,
which.
well, his price on natural gas is either, quite frankly, a typo, or it's a hidden joke because like David said, the price of oil can get to what he said, but
Okay.
the price of natural gas, as I mentioned last time, measured in cubic meters, okay, generally is a few dollars, so you're not going to get to thousands of dollars. I mean, it's usually between like $3 and $5, okay, so to get to $5,000 in U.S.
Per
dollars is
per,
absurd.
So he
per
used the period, and
1,000
I thought
cubic
it was
meters.
$5.
He said $5,000 per 1,000 cubic meters, or $5 per 1 cubic meter.
Oh, is that right? Is that the okay?
Exactly.
Number three, the EU will collapse after the UK's return. Euro will drop out of use as the former EU currency.
That's humor, but it's also his wet dream.
It is what he would wish would happen, of course. Number four, Poland and Hungary will occupy western regions of the formerly existing Ukraine.
Can we add a joke to these? Can we just say that, in another few years Ukraine's going to be using the euro to buy his memorabilia? Sorry.
No,
Well, it historically, Poland and Lithuania used to own a good portion of the former Ukraine, but that likely happening now is not likely. But it's a historical joke that he just put in there.
They wouldn't want it unless
Sakara,
they were forced.
every time you say one of those, you should do a rim shot.
Yeah.
I think we could use a humorous lens to look at this, but I thought we were smarter than this. This is a wish list for everything turning around and going in to a negotiation where you would say, "Oh wow, Russia really could put us over the coals." But this is a fantasy, right? Wasn't this a dystopia wish list for the holidays? That's the only way I took it out as a joke. But it's not a joke. We're in a newsroom, so I'm not offended that we can't talk about it like this. But I think everybody sees it as Putin's wish list, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's like a villain
I
wish list.
agree.
It's as
I
if
agree as well. But we're going to do a vote here once we get to number 10 to see do people think he's intending to be in any way humorous, and then we'll get everybody's take on what they think he's really up to here. Number 5, things start getting a little deeper. The Fourth Reich will be created, encompassing the territory of Germany and its satellites, i.e., Poland and the Baltic states, Czechia, or Czech Republic, Slovakia, the Kiev Republic, and other outcasts. Number 6. War will break out between France and the Fourth Reich. Europe will be divided, Poland repartitioned in the process. Number 7. Northern Ireland will separate from the UK and join the Republic of Ireland. Number 8. Civil war will break out in the US, California and Texas becoming independent states as a result. Texas and Mexico will form an allied state. Elon Musk will win the presidential election in a number of states, which, after the new civil wars end, will have been given to the GOP. Number 9. All the largest stock markets and financial activity will leave the US and Europe and move to Asia. And last but not least, ending it on a whiz-bang humdinger of a knee slapper, the Bretton Woods system of monetary management will collapse, leading to the IMF and the World Bank to crash. Euro and dollar will stop circulating as the global reserve currencies. Digital fiat currencies will be actively used instead. Seasoned
Wait,
greetings, and then he ends with seasoned greetings to you all, Anglo-Saxon friends, and their happily oinking piglets.
wait, what the shit? This is the thread that Musk endorsed? What the?
didn't
Going
Exactly.
for government contracts for literally like the ICBM backups right here with the nukes with the other parts. I went to nuke Mars. That's the whole thing for hey, I've got a backup missile program for you guys, et cetera, et cetera. All those NASA contracts. How much of his entire wealth is built on the largest of the U.S. taxpayer?
Chief
Exactly. But
Ultimately,
he's
Justice
also
John
he's
Roberts, we
also
have a
also have
problem.
you ever looked at how SpaceX was formed and his reception when he went to visit the Russians for their support? And do we know what happened at
I
that
do.
point in time?
He when I happen to know this, yes, personally. He wanted to build rockets. The Russians made engines that he needed, and he went and said, "I would like to buy some of your engines." And they laughed him out of the building. And he said, "Okay." And I'm. This is why I've told people in this room multiple times: never insult or laugh in the face of this Elon Muskie guy, because he has a long, rich history of making people eat their fucking shoes and their words. And he uh, will not sleep, very literally, until you have thoroughly dug your own grave and happily jumped in it.
But that's
The
not Chris's
guy who
point. Chris's point is that he needs to know who's buttering his buns, and that's
Exactly.
been the
He
American
would,
taxpayer on the credits for the car. That's been a bunch of contracts from the government, and quite frankly, it gets some of us that are a
and
little
the
bit
state of
more
California.
patriotic kind of fucking sick when that guy says stuff to the senators and says just juvenile crap.
we
Kind of
just had an
hiding
insurrection.
halfway behind his condition or what have you. It's sophomoric. The fact that he's a big celebrity is only because of the toxin that we feed ourselves with social media. There are much more higher character level people in Silicon Valley to applaud.
We
Okay, I
just
think
had an act of insurrection. Having a former leader of another state that we are not directly in conflict with, but essentially having a proxy war starting to occur with things with Ukraine, and then saying and accepting an endorsement from that, saying you should run the country, and then at the same time having your entire wealth base built on this on handouts from that same government. I
And
mean,
you still do not know what the source of that funding is, and you still do not know that yes, he
I
was
would be furious if I was one of those government officials.
as Tyler said, he was laughed out of the building, but you don't know what else happened, and you don't have a full
Race
comprehension of
Ipsiloquitur, it's on the
why.
dark web.
Right, but why did he come up with his Putin peace plan? Ukraine should just give up. Why is David Sachs? What is going on there?
This
And
goes beyond selling
follow
cars or
follow the
petrol
money.
cars. This goes beyond essentially selling cars to essentially saying, well, we've already sold it to all the hippies in California, and now let's shift to politics, essentially on the right wing, so we can appeal to more of the Cybertruck type kind of aesthetics. And Texas is more favorable regulatory. And so it's like, I get some aspect of saying, okay, lean a little bit left, lean a little right. It's like, okay, you can do this. You've got teams of people to manage this thing. This is crossing a line. This is actively being endorsed by
But
essentially groups
wasn't
that
but
essentially
wasn't
were at war with.
proposing a peace plan doing much the same thing, is crossing that line and engaging with political figures that are saying I just think it's chaos theory. So if
This
we
is
go back
far
to the
more
point, if we go
blatant.
back to the point, just to Tyler's point, right? Is this funny or not funny? I don't find this funny. And in fact, I find
You're not.
it the same fucking gaslighting and tomfoolery that Trump is up to with the I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and Mexicans are rapists. It's gaslighting. And so Medvedev is now being endorsed as an epic thread by the gaslighter in chief so that nobody knows what's going on, nobody knows who's to trust, and we're having conversations like this. It's extremely frustrating.
it's like
Absolutely correct. And
idiocracy.
may I make a quick statement? Do you know what they call? Okay, kerosene
Hold on,
is
hold on.
called
Sonali, finish your.
kerosene. Kerosene is called clan cologne.
Okay. So, by the way, Nicholas, perhaps you missed Elon's comment when he said epic thread. He responded to himself by saying a new tweet. Those are definitely the most absurd predictions I've ever heard, while also showing astonishing lack of awareness of the progress of AI and sustainable energy. I think Elon is being like,
He's trying to play both sides.
There
I
was
don't
a
think
full
so.
article
Gaslighting.
link.
This is
I think
gaslighting. This is exactly what
Yes, it
gaslighting
is.
is. You give amplification to crazy people like Alex Jones, like Kanye, and all this other shit. And all it does is sows disaffection. It is all about identity politics. It's all about dividing people. It's nothing about what unites us. It's all about creating division and thinner slicing. Why? Because you can control people better when you move them into polarization and you just remove the middle. And that's what he's constantly doing. And it's annoying. It's
Devar,
Not
just
only
point out
that,
something.
but
Hold
he
on,
removed,
10
yeah,
seconds.
sorry, just quickly, Chris, he removed credibility of the organization that is in charge of actually monitoring this. Like, I don't know if anyone's actually realized that. People are talking about the FBI and the CIA and all this stuff and losing trust in these agencies. Those are the agencies that are actually in charge of monitoring this man and his actions. And this is something that should be fully focused on, is that there are a lot of people blindly trusting him, and he is exhibiting gaslighting behavior that Nicholas is talking about. And he's got so much business ties all around the world that he should be monitored directly by the American government.
I think
Very
this is a
briefly,
great
his
opportunity for somebody like Mike Judge to make a sequel to Idiocracy based on Medvedev's tweets. I think it's definitely would make for a great film. It's a little shocking that he said that stuff out loud. So, but Mike Judge, if you're listening, if you're out there, you should
because
get on this. Even maybe feature
I want to
Medvedev
do
in the film, which would be
I
I want
have
to do
Why not the South Park guys?
You
a
know
real
what
quick.
I'm
Hold on,
thinking?
flash your mics on, or you can do hand raises now on stage, right? No,
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 See that?
no, the audience can.
flash.
Right?
Or just do thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yep.
I have
Right?
a 15-second
Yeah,
point,
that's
kind of
Hold on,
important,
Chris.
but
Hold on, Chris. What, you can do that while we do the vote. Cheryl, how did we used to do the votes in the old days? The audience can raise their hand to speak, right?
Yes, we can
Okay,
reset
great.
Flashing
the hand
Yeah,
raise and then they can raise their hand.
yeah. Raise your. If you think this guy is in any way being insincere, whether he's joking, whether it's forget the degree or of humor he's intending, but if you think he's insincere in what he's saying, he doesn't actually believe what he's saying, uh, raise your hand to speak on stage, and then I have an auto counter here. It'll tell me exactly how many people believe that. So go ahead and raise your hands now to speak on stage, and then we'll clear the hand raises in a minute,
Yep.
and then we'll let the other side answer, and then we'll see what people think. So currently, 8 people think he's being insincere, or 9.
9.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Hands down. Now, raise your hands if you think he is being sincere in what he's saying. Already at 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 19, 20. So 2 to 1. Okay. So it's 2 to 1 think he does believe it. I'm with them. I think he. I don't know. They're so absurd. You can't possibly believe that.
But this is what we talked about
Can we say that
with
he
what
meant to
Donald Trump
put it
did.
out
Look,
there?
we talked about this before. This is what Donald Trump did. When you put this information out over an information network, what
Right.
you're doing is you're looking for a reflection. You're looking
Right.
for an impulse.
Right.
And the reason why you make messages of extreme is to see the pulse. And when you see the pulse and you've got a man inside who's looking at all the pulses and has an AI team that can interpret the pulses, you have power, deep power. You can tell very easily. So I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. Whoever agrees with that, you don't need to put any money into converting them. They're converted. And it's a sorting algorithm. So all of these crazy, what seem to be crazy messages are about measuring consensus, about measuring truth across a information network. That's
Yeah,
what's
that's a
going
great
on.
point.
Okay.
I have a very brief point.
Go ahead,
15
Chris.
seconds. Okay, Tyler?
Yeah.
Okay, very brief. Domestic, foreign. You have policy on both. You only have so many hours in the day. You only have so many state officers. You only have so many people in government that can put attention to one or the other. If you're spending time on domestic, you don't have time for a foreign. If you're spending all of your attention, political points on foreign, you don't have time for domestic. An active thing of geopolitics, if you want to cause a bunch of chaos in another country, it has extreme foreign policy advantages because it means that they are spending their time on domestic issues. They don't have time to come after you. Literally, all their leaders are essentially putting out domestic fires. We sponsor this as USA. We sponsor this in other countries. We sponsor dissident groups all worldwide. When this is happening with Russia, they are actively sponsoring domestic dissent happening here, domestic USA. It's not authentic or homegrown, but by the time it essentially gets to this scale, it's encompassed such a number of people that it causes us to basically have to split our attention between foreign policy and domestic, and that's where the actual thing is happening here.
Here's another thought. I mean, everybody forgets things are taken two different ways: the way people put things in text versus the way they say it. So there's really no context in text. Okay, and that's the thing a lot of people keep forgetting. You know, you can't tell if somebody's joking. How many times has somebody been triggered by a joke on social media?
Yeah,
Right?
but,
That
but how many times do we get jokes like this from world leaders?
It doesn't matter. It's about the
they're people.
response. It's about the response. It's action, reaction. It's physics.
I know. Here's my point. Here's my
People
point.
get killed over these jokes.
This is my
These
point.
ones in particular.
This is my point. The guy is a world.
People fall out of
Hold
windows.
on. The guy is a nuclear world power, and he's making jokes that world leaders are specifically trained how to speak in very precise ways to not be misinterpreted, yada yada yada. And here he is just doing the complete opposite. And he must be aware of that. These are highly provocative. If there is any intention of being humorous, it's largely missed by people. That was the point of the vote. And so politicians on the receiving end of this tweet, um,
Tyler. So that's where it
yeah,
was confusing. Were we talking about the vote on Mevdev or on Musk? Because that's where it seemed a little
Medvedev.
confusing.
Okay,
Yeah.
Medvedev. Yeah, yeah, I can tell you that Elon thinks this is like hilariously, ridiculously absurd, and as he said, and that's why maybe he needed to clarify what he meant when he said epic thread, because in his vernacular, saying it's epic is in
But
Southern
he knows,
California
but oh
vernacular.
come on, Tyler! But he knows that this is going to drive engagement. The only thing
Correct.
he cares about is
I'll give you
engagement.
that.
So,
He
right?
has a
So
self interest
Yeah,
in
Elon
right.
is
promoting.
the new Trump.
But
I'm,
that's the Trumpian factor. It's so dangerous to give oxygen to that type of reflection, but it has so much data contained therein, so that if you're the meme king and you own this giant, you know, disinformation machine and chaos creating machine, he is a chaos agent because he succeeds by driving engagement. And so it's irresponsible to say epic thread, and that's why he responded. How much later did he respond to that? And was that response because people, said to him, what the fuck are you doing? This is, he's an enemy of the state. He's on the sanction list.
And
good question.
to the point on what world leaders should and shouldn't say, I totally agree with that line of thinking, and that's why I was among the people who were appalled when Reagan said we begin bombing in 5 minutes, right? Something he never should have said, but he got away with it and kind of swaggered about it, and that's a different version of that is what
I was going
Musk
to
is
bring that up
doing.
because the Russians scrambled jets in reaction to that in real time.
Yeah, World War III
Yeah.
almost happened.
5 of those 10 points that was raised for his wish list involve mass death. The organization
Yeah.
that that man was in control of and will continue to essentially have influence with and might return to control of an organization have been responsible for carrying out things, participating directly in those sorts of genocides in the regions that are currently under conflict in an actual war scenario, which they've now acknowledged as an actual war. It's different from, oh, there's a random shit poster on Twitter that says something random. When a head of state speaks, they do not speak as an individual. They speak on behalf of the power of the state that wields nuclear weapons, armies of millions of people. When a state leader says something, it has consequences. It's not just a random, oh, I got an upvote to go up and down on a list. It results in death. It results in large destruction. It results in chaos that can take decades to recover from. Millions of lives.
Well, if you're
That
talking
is the
about
sort
the
of gravity that is missing here, and it is abominable that state leaders ever endorsed a platform that has this sort of a risk attached to it. This is it's less about Medvedev as having this tweet. Why are any state leaders on such a joke of a platform that has gone this far that the joke has become something that risks this sort of destruction? That's unacceptable. There's so much failure responsibility in so many parties. It's hard to know where to begin.
Right. So the issue is you've got a state actor who is signaling, right? We can agree that it's signaling. We don't know whether it's humorous signaling, intent signaling. He says our, which implies that he has, to Tyler's point, some blessing in suggesting these things. And it's telling us that the inheritor or the group that is allied with this leader are completely nutso, right? Because 5 of the 10 statements are completely, unimaginable, almost as mad as the alien stuff. So these are the people that are close to the throne, shall we say. And that obviously has to tell us something as well, is that are they trying to say, we're completely nuts here? Because if you're dealing with people that are completely nuts, that does affect the calculus when you are in the State Department. So you can also look at it like that.
I
Another
mean,
kind of,
the air that it had was like when a bully says something that's racist and sexist and then just follows it with "just kidding."
I mean, another opportunity here is just to recognize that Putin's war is cultural and just frame. It's actually genocide. and the war crimes. I mean, these are this is the reality Ukrainian people are dealing with, right? So, with the reality of the moment, I think we can just kind of throw this into the whole kind of what will the next few scenarios of Putin's last chapter look like,
You know
and
what you're
how
leaving
can
out.
we do? How can we get down one of those without any kind of nuclear entanglement? But
So this
this,
is what I predict will happen, honestly. Since we all know that there's a whole thing about 400 million people on Twitter's information being exposed, how much said they're going to claim their account was hacked? And yes, you can Google that. It's already out there. I look at it, it's probably scraping, but other people look at it as more.
Okay.
And so
And
we live in a world of information that we need to verify, because otherwise, look at the creativity of a bunch of humans on a call from all over the world who've come up with 6 plausible routes of thinking around this signal in the information field.
other tweets we have to run through and then jump out the window ourselves is North
Just quickly,
Korea.
Tyler, I just got to say to the whole room, Nicholas understands this better than anyone I've ever interacted with in my life. So it is really good to pay attention to what he is saying.
Okay. North Korea. This is from BB from the BBC. That's our own internal private joke here. North Korean drones. South Korea's military apologizes for pursuit failure. South Korea's military has apologized for failing to shoot down 5 drones that North Korea flew across their mutual border on Monday.
They launched a bunch of fighters and failed to shoot those drones down. I'm just curious, is there a more like a convincing way, or like just you don't need to use those fighters to chase such a drones in then and then protect the boundaries? That's my question.
Well, they should thank North Korea for giving them the free rehearsal to figure that scenario out, so that they're more prepared when things are much more on the line.
You sure that's not food delivery?
Sure.
Because
So
yeah, well, they'd be going the wrong way if it was food delivery.
Put the gun down, Tyler. Put the gun down.
If yeah, there's the food only goes south to north. What else? There's a woman haunting the internet created by AI. New mind-bending technology that creates media from scratch. That's from Poppy. Just retweeting that one about an internet ghost of sorts. And
That's an interesting thing. What's an artifact in the system?
what else do we have here today? Oh, we covered that one yesterday. We covered that yesterday. A Russian lawmaker dies after the fall of the Indian hotel we covered yesterday. We covered all these yesterday.
Now he died in the same hotel that his friend died in. What, about a month earlier of a heart attack? That's fascinating.
He was there because he was trying to recover from his upset about his friend's death, supposedly.
What a way to mourn, right?
Okay, well, that's it for today, everybody. We'll do it again tomorrow on Thursday. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
tomorrow's Friday,
Thank
Tyler.
you.
And